Well, welcome to Bible study today. We're in Genesis, where are we at, 32?
32.
Perfect. So, a little bit has happened since last time. So, anybody want to tell us what we did last time? What did we look at last time?
Isaac was born.
Isaac was born.
When Sarah laughed.
Sarah laughed. Just like that.
But she said she didn't.
But she
Yeah,
said she didn't, but she did.
She
got
lied.
scolded.
So yeah, so that's where we left off with. We left off with that couple. Again, that couple was sort of the first couple. Well, not the first couple. The first one that's sort of attached to the promise. So you had Adam and Eve, which I would say would be the first couple. You have Abraham and Sarah, and they came along later, and God promised them a lot of descendants, promised them some land. Made a lot of promises. And a lot of those promises were more from God's perspective than Abraham's perspective, because Abraham didn't always do a very good job with that, but instead, still God honored God's promises. So who is Jacob? Who knows some stuff about Jacob? Anybody?
He stole the blessing with the help of his mother from his brother Esau.
He
Yep.
was sneaky.
He's
Born second.
so whose son is he?
He's the son of Isaac.
Son of Isaac. So the way it ties in from last week, so we had the child that was born last week was Isaac. Then Isaac has a child, and that child, he actually has twins. They were born at the same time, Esau and Jacob. And Jacob, does anybody know what Jacob means?
Liar.
Well, liar for one,
Deceiver.
deceiver, or heel catcher, something like that.
Oh, yeah, because he was holding on to
Yeah.
the heel of his
Yep.
twin brother.
So yeah, and so then Jacob. What do you think about Jacob? What do you know about Jacob? Just from his name, even. What are some things
Coat
here?
of many colors.
No,
No,
that's
that's
Joseph. That's Donny Osmond.
yeah. Jacob, just read about. He wrestled with God.
Yep. What else do we know about Jacob?
Oh, he deceived his father.
Mm-hmm. And
He had trouble getting his wife.
he had trouble getting his wife.
He wanted one woman,
Yep.
but he had to take another
Yep.
because his father-in-law.
Was deceptive.
Yeah.
He was
Deceived his father-in-law with the flocks.
Yep. And he in turn deceived his father-in-law.
But he became the leader. I mean, he led didn't he?
Which one for Jacob? So he had a pretty big family, had pretty good entourage. So he didn't get along well with his brother. You have to talk about sibling rivalry. Esau and Jacob did not get along at all. And which is one of the reasons why Jacob left, was because Esau was going to kill him. So, there was that. So you can see that the relationship isn't very good. The relationship is pretty. The relationship is not a good thing. So. So into this, some of the questions you have about Jacob, I would have about Jacob is, this guy is supposed to be favored by God. What does it say about God? Because Jacob was a jerk.
Yeah, why would he pick Jacob?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why would God pick Jacob?
He always picks the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And he can use anyone.
He can use anyone.
He
Yeah.
picked him to save him
Yeah.
from himself.
So, yes. He picked him to save him from himself. And so we're going to talk about.
Oh, like it came from nowhere.
Oh, it's me. It was me. It was me ringing. But yeah, so it was. So he was a very interesting fellow to say the least. And so, what we know about Jacob, he's sort of a scoundrel, sort of a jerk, doesn't get along with his family members very well. His life revolves around deception. And this is the guy that God favors. I don't know. That seems a little sketchy to me.
Very sketchy.
Yeah. So.
Right.
Yeah, so where we're at right now is, so Jacob got married to his 2 wives, and of course there's drama with them. And then he leaves his father-in-law, and he comes back to, he's going to go back and see his brother. And he's nervous about it, because his brother, as you know, last time we talked to his brother, he was going to kill him. So now, that's where we're sort of at right now. So we're going to have
Need to be scooched up.
Jacob coming back. He's going to meet his brother. He sort of has a fatalistic view because he thinks his brother is going to kill him. He arranges his gifts to give to Esau. Sort of positions himself at the end so that everybody else can sort of go free, and at the end, that Esau, if really Esau still has a beef with him, he's the one who's going to get it, not the rest of his family. But if anything looks suspicious too, he's at the end, so he can ride away. So sort of, he's not being a very good leader. You could say he's very much a coward. You could say he's very much a coward in all of this. So yeah, so that's where we sort of start off for today. Let's see, what does it have us for the whole text? Is it 22 to 32?
9 through 13.
9 through 13. All right.
And 22
Yeah,
to
22.
30.
Okay, so how about someone read 9 through 13 for me?
Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. So he spent the night there. Then he selected from what he had with him a present for his brother Esau.
Is that nice?
Well, it's if we look at this a little bit into sort of see what the manner that Jacob is saying this. So again, Abraham and Isaac, they know the promise. God's promised them to have a lot of descendants, all that sort of stuff. And Jacob's a little wily about it. Remember, God, you promised that everything's going to be okay. So if that doesn't go well tomorrow, that's on you, not on me. Because you promised. How many of you have kids like that? You promised to take me to the store. You promised to do that for me.
And that he would have the same descendants as Abraham. I know it's the same promise.
Same promise. And like I said, he's a much sketchier guy. So that's how I want you to sort of read that particular text. He's not, oh God, yes, I am your servant. It's like, God, I don't want to die tomorrow, and you told me I wouldn't die tomorrow. So honor your promise, because other than that, it's all on you. It's not on me. So.
Well, I find it interesting. He prays for God to deliver him from Esau, but then he sets up all these presents and sends them
Right.
one at a time.
Exactly. So is he really, he's hedging his bet.
He's hedging.
Yeah, he's hedging. He's hedging his bets. He doesn't really, so if God doesn't do it, well, I'll have to do it. Again, we sort of see this as family history, right? Abraham and Sarah. Well, doesn't honor God's promise in the way we want to do it, so we're going to do it on our own, and they screwed that up. And then, so Jacob's the same way. Well, God's going to honor God's promise, yeah, but just to make sure, to be on the safe side, I'm going to make sure that I kick in a little bit more to So I get out of this okay. So, all right. So then 22 through 32. So who wants to read? How about 22 to 27?
That night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok.
Sounds good. Yep.
After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered.
And then 28 through 32.
Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh.
Okay. So, there's something very interesting about the Hebrew in the text here. I just want to hear different people's translations. Who did Jacob wrestle?
Who did Jacob what?
Wrestle.
Oh, man.
A man.
A man.
You got a man. Anybody else got anything different than man?
I understood he wrestled with God.
Mhm.
That man was manifest.
What did she say?
She said that he wrestled with God, but that man was sort of manifest. So,
Or an angel? I mean,
could be an angel.
you heard that?
Yep. Some translations say angel. Well, the Hebrew doesn't make it easy. The Hebrew can mean all those things. So, this was where the original language is not helpful. It doesn't allow you to, because a lot of times we can say insight and say, okay, yeah, well, this word means this. And this particular word can mean man or God or angel or divine being, whatever you want to say.
It
So-
won't translate back at all?
Nope. A lot of stuff in Hebrew means a lot of different things. So a couple of these words can mean more than one thing. So, and that's unfortunately what we're butting up against. So, yeah. So there's that. So who do you think Jacob wrestled with?
I think he wrestled God, and I think God was testing his perseverance.
Okay.
But I don't know why he wrestled him.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. Why did God?
Yeah.
But who else do you think Jacob wrestled? Who do you think he wrestled with?
I think he wrestled with Jesus,
Mm.
because anytime God manifests himself as a human, that would be
As Jesus.
Jesus.
Okay.
But my footnote is interesting. Jacob may have thought at first that he was wrestling with Esau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guilty conscience.
Guilty
Yeah,
conscience.
he
Yeah.
wrestled with himself.
Mm-hmm. Could have been wrestling with himself. Absolutely. What else? Who else do you think he was wrestling with?
Yeah, but if he was wrestling God or Jesus, I mean, they were just playing with him.
Mhm.
Because they should have just kicked this, you know what?
Right.
They injured him,
Right.
weakened him, I guess.
So then, what does it say about a God that doesn't beat Jacob? I mean, you could say he's playing with him, but
Lets him win.
lets him win. What is it? What else would you say about that?
He's trying to teach him a lesson.
Okay, what lesson is he trying to teach him?
That's for you.
Those promises aren't easy to come, or you earn those promises.
Okay, you earned God's promise. That's a good way to look at it too.
What do you think it means?
What do I think it means? It's interesting. So if you think of this encounter with Jacob, so he wrestles with God, and he is changed in that encounter, right? So how do we know that Jacob is changed?
Gives him a new name.
Gives him a new name. And so, and that new name means what?
God strives, or he who strives with God.
Yeah, yeah. So he's called Israel. God strives. God needs to struggle. You could say that person. So the name is changed from being deceitful, from being a heel. I always think of wrestling whenever I hear that terminology. I don't know if you've ever watched WWF wrestling before, or WWE,
It's
which
real.
I know. So, what they call a villain is a heel. So, so you could look at heel in this context as Jacob being sort of a villain type person. In some sense, he is. I mean, he doesn't play straight with his father. He takes and swipes his brother's birthright away from him. He lies to his father-in-law, and now he's trying to weasel his way back into God's good graces. I don't know about you, that doesn't sound like a very good person to me. He sounds like a pretty bad character. And so during this time, we see him that he struggles with God, and then God changes his name. And the funny part, if we read a little bit farther into the text, is in some sense, he doesn't really change. He still is deceptive to his brother. Because the brother's like, yeah, you can come on me back to camp. And Jacob's like, oh no, that's okay. I'm good. I got to go to the dentist. So I'll go to the dentist. I'll come back later on, check in with you later. And Esau's like, are you sure? Oh yeah, I got to get that molar. It's got to go. So, but he's deceptive with his brother. He doesn't really, in some sense, really trust the promise at that point either. He doesn't trust that God has sort of softened Esau's heart. If anything, Esau should be the hero of this journey because he's changed, right? He's gone from wanting to kill his brother to now, I forgive you. So why aren't we reading about Esau? He's obviously the better of the two brothers. So why is Esau not the hero of our story? Someone who's wrong, someone who had to go without a blessing, without God's blessing, has to go, make a name for themselves in the world to become powerful and to be successful and stuff like that. Finds it in his heart to say, I forgive you. I should not be as angry with you. God has a plan for me as well as for you, and that's okay. But we're stuck with this Jacob guy. Why do you think that's the case?
Something to do with forgiveness? I don't know.
Something to do with forgiveness, yeah. Or
It's
I
the
don't
promise.
really think.
The children of Jacob?
children of Jacob. What about the children of Esau? Came from the same father and mother. It's hard. I mean, this is a tough story. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right?
God is playing favorites.
God's
God.
playing favorites.
Well,
Interesting. Does God play favorites?
Maybe.
So, who do you think Jacob really represents in this story?
Us.
Us. Us. So, in that sense, the story makes perfect sense that we follow Jacob and we don't follow Esau. Because Esau is the golden child. Esau is the one that does everything, quote unquote, right, if you want to put it that way. But Esau would be a lot harder to measure up in our daily lives, right? Because if we look through this text, I bet every one of us have done, hopefully nothing as bad as Jacob, but we've done some pretty sketchy stuff in our lives. How many times have we lied to somebody? How many times have we hurt somebody? How many times have we made people mad? Yeah. So, yeah, we've done all those things. And so, isn't it still amazing that even with somebody as bad as Jacob, God says, yep, here's the promise, I'm going to honor the promise. So,
Isn't this really a earlier version of the prodigal son?
yeah, you could do that. Or I would say, why don't we talk about, so the other text that's in the RCL, the Revised Common Lectionary this week, is talking about the field, the hired hands in the field, where each of them come in and they all at the end of the day get paid the same wage, and the people in the front are like, hey, what gives? We've been doing this longer than they have. It talks about grace, but a lot of times when we look at that story, we're like, how can you run a business like that? And one, it's always, this is the kingdom of God, which is a little different than a business. But the other thing too is that that people, when they hear that story and feel indignant for, is we always assume we're the people in the front. We always assume that we're the people at the first time of the day walking in and doing the work right away. That's a bad assumption. We might be, all of us here, we might be those last people walking in right now. You know, we make the assumption that we're the first people. We're not. What if we're the last? The last people that God says, yeah, you have an hour left, why don't you come in, we'll get the wages for you. So, again, so as we think about this, you know, this story, I want us to think about why it's important that we take Jacob's look. And so if the other thing that's interesting as we look at this particular story is who do we wrestle with?
Our conscience.
We can wrestle with our conscience. And so one other thing I was going to read you guys today was a little bit, let's see if I can find it here. Talking about face. There's an interesting thing in Hebrew that we can't understand because we can't read the original Hebrew. All right. So the change in how Jacob sees himself in relationship to his brother is underlined even further when Jacob again calls himself a servant of Esau, of whom he is sending presents so that he might be accepted in his presence. It is unfortunate that the New Revised Standard Version of Genesis 32:20 does not allow the reader to see the play on the Hebrew word phi, which means face or presence. It reads, I may appease him, his face, with the present that I'm going ahead of my face. And afterwards I see his face. Perhaps he will accept me, lift up his face. Needless to say, the repetition of this word anticipates the name that Jacob will give the place where he wrestled the mysterious person, the face of God. Later, when Jacob eventually meets Esau, he says, For truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God. So there's an alliteration in the text that talks about face. There's a play on the words of the word face within the text, which is interesting because I think if we would look at this story from a visual perspective, if we watched a movie of this particular scene, I think we would know who the person. We wouldn't be able to see the face of the person who. So here's a funny thing. If you wrestle, have anybody ever wrestled before?
My sons have.
Right.
And
They get-
so I have too.
Yeah, so you get pretty close to the person. You could probably identify the person pretty well. So it's interesting that we hear a mysterious man. You know, that even though they're locked in combat, you'd think you would get to know that particular person. So an interesting thought, which came out of what Don was thinking, or out of his little subtext, was that maybe the man that Jacob wrestled was Esau. So instead of actually going in the form of Jesus, that God had the presence of Esau. So not necessarily so that way when Jacob and Esau wrestled, Jacob sort of knew who he was wrestling. He couldn't place his finger on it. Have you ever been, next to somebody and you're like, I know that person, I just can't remember their name, and their face looks familiar. Yeah. So I wonder if that's what Jacob is happening to Jacob right here when he's wrestling. He's like, oh, I know this person. This person seems familiar, but and he might get a glimpse of who it is. But what would it mean if we think of it from a theological faith context? What does it mean that that mysterious figure would have been Esau, or had the face of Esau? What do you think?
Or it could have been Satan.
Could have been Satan.
I think
Some
so.
people's lives are filled with.
Yeah, but I think in this particular text, the way that the text moves, I don't think it could be Satan.
So is he just reliving all the things he did to Esau, all the bad things?
He could have. He could have been reliving all the things that he had done.
I think Esau would have won.
Well, and Esau sort of did win. Punched him in the hip, right?
I guess that's
Yeah.
right.
He can't walk it the same.
But I would say where he couldn't.
Yeah, they were sort of a stalemate. They were
Yeah.
sort of a stalemate. But it's interesting that when Jacob asked for a couple different things. He asked for that blessing again. So this is the reason why some people pointed out it could be Esau, is because Jacob is asking for the blessing again. He stole Esau's blessing. You never hear the man's name. That's another interesting thing too. And that the man has enough power, though, to give Jacob a new name. And Jacob accepts the name, doesn't he? Which is pretty funny too. They were evenly matched. Why would he accept the name?
See, but would Esau have the power to give him a new name? That's why I think it's something more.
Yeah,
Was it Isaac? Was it his father?
could be his father. Could be a lot of different people. It could be a lot of different people. But I believe that God was in that person who was wrestling Jacob. But if you look at it from the perspective of you're wrestling, Jacob's wrestling with the person that's causing the most suffering for him, right, or having the biggest problem with him. And if you look at it in the context of God being within that person, so that Jacob is wrestling with that person, with God being present at the same time, how does that change the argument? Like I said, so one of the things that I was thinking about this, there's people that are going to drive you nuts, right? There's people that you have a hard time with, that people you got to deal with, people that make your life miserable. So how would it look when you're dealing with them to look at them with the context that God is within them and talking to you through them? How does that change your perspective? How does that reframe the way that you approach the problem? Because the way that we tend to approach stuff is we intend to approach you as you have the demon inside you, you have the devil inside you, and so I'm going to respond accordingly. But what if instead we looked at the person we're having the most problems with and we said, you have God inside you. How do I deal with you?
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Yeah, it's not. It's a wound to the hip, isn't it? It changes you characteristically. And I think that's the reason why we hear that his hip injury and he's going to have to deal with that for the rest of his life. It's because the way, this is sort of a way to show us that our frames need to be redirected. The way that we look at the world needs to be reframed. And so as we think of that, what does that look like for ourselves? I think this story is really inviting us to say, okay, you're looking at the world in one particular direction, one particular way. Jacob is looking at this world in one particular way. If we represent Jacob, or Jacob represents us, and we look at everything as we're deceiving, we are just looking out for ourselves, at the end of the day, it's all about us. What's that reframing doing? What is that reframing doing for us?
It's hard to see those that we the person that drives you nuts, or the one that you can't work with or don't get along with. It's hard to find God in them. I mean, we don't want to see God in them because surely He's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a hard stepping stone.
It is.
And that's a wounding stepping stone, isn't it? Knowing that
Oh,
that person, and even to say it like that person. So yeah, this story of wrestling is it's a big challenge for us. Because can you think of some people in your life, or people that you always say they? Know them people?
I don't like to name them.
Yeah. You don't like to name them? Yeah. Those
Yep.
It's, yep. Yep. And so this text is inviting us to look at those people as if they're filled by God. So the person we're wrestling with is, and wrestling with that person, how do we get so the harder part is, how do we get a blessing out of that? You're wrestling with people you don't like. How do you get a blessing out of that? That seems stupid, right? So the people that you don't like, the people that drive you nuts, you get a blessing out of that? Does that seem right?
some of those people, do they even know they have God inside them? Has that
Right.
ever even dawned on them?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Listen to me.
But yeah, so this is so what do you guys think? Am I just blowing smoke? What do you guys think? It's a tough perspective.
It is. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
Bite your tongue and just say you are the man, or you have God in you.
So I don't necessarily think it's biting your tongue, but how do you reframe that? How do you reframe that relationship then? So we probably all have a political party we don't like. That's probably pretty easy to probably, yes, I'll probably say that. Or there might be two political parties we don't like. And you see the division in our country right now. At one point in time, not that long ago, it's probably still going on today, people, and this has been happening, you can't be my friend if you're a Republican, or you can't be my friend if you're a Democrat. And that's been real. And how many family systems right now are utterly shredded because of that right now? How many people can't go to Thanksgiving dinner because, because we have to win? And that's the viewpoint we have right now. We have to win. But the viewpoint today is asking you to do something different. So what do you guys think about that?
It's the basic premise of love your enemy.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that everyone is God's child. He wants everyone to come to Him. It's just that they haven't yet, or maybe they have, and we all sin and revert to. Yeah, now I'm babbling, but anyway, it's love your enemy, love everyone. That's God loves you.
Yeah. And that's all.
To your question about can you get a blessing out of it? Well, yeah, you can sleep better, you can relax, and not be caught up in all the emotions of dislike, hate, all that stuff. definitely blessings to be had.
Because that all eats away at yourself.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
ruins your life.
Then how come we don't want to do the blessing though?
What do you mean? We're supposed
Like
to
you said,
bless that
Pastor
person?
Huh?
You're not gonna ruin my blessing.
You're not going to ruin my blessing. Exactly. So then, if we're blessed to be able to talk to our enemies and have this new type of relationship with them, then why don't we do it? We don't look for those type of blessings, right? You don't go to somebody you have been having a particularly hard time with and say, "Let's sit down and talk about this and sort of figure this out, and we can either agree to disagree, but how do I still respect you and stuff like that?" How many times do we do that?
We do it to keep peace. In
I would say most people don't even do it to keep peace. They don't do it at all. It's
the
easier.
we love.
Yeah. It's easier to do this thing on the phone. We just hit block,
Unfriend.
unfriend,
Yeah.
unsubscribe, walk out of your church. It's a lot easier to do that. And so if you want to know why this wrestling match is such a big deal, that's why. Because you stay engaged. Because Jacob was engaged. And it was touch and go. Yeah. Things didn't go always this way. He had to do a reversal. He got reversed. He got a single leg takedown. The other guy got a single leg takedown. I mean, yeah. It was going back and forth. They were evenly matched. He wasn't winning or losing. But, he, at the end of the day, this is hard stuff to work with. So after today, are you going to walk to that person that drives you nuts and say, "Hey, let's go get a coffee and sit down"?
Nope. I'll give it to God to handle. You lead me. You got to lead me through this one because this is too. I'm not there.
But what would be the blessing if that happened? If you decide to do that?
Oh, it would be that weight would be lifted.
Okay. So why don't you do that today then?
Maybe tomorrow.
Tomorrow. But that's the thing. Yeah, like I said, it's easy to see. Yeah, Jacob won at the end, and when we get that reframe, so when God honors God's promise, we also get wounded in the process. Ouch. How do you feel about that? Do you want to be wounded by God in the process?
It's part of the battle.
I want God on my side.
Yeah, it's a scarf.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we think when God honors God's promise, we think it's okay, we're on easy street. It's going to work out really easily. There's going to be no conflict. And as we're watching you're reading these stories, you're probably going like, "Oh, Pastor, you're not painting a pretty picture here." But I think that's really what it's about. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And as much as we want it to be easy, it's not. And the things we want to avoid. So this story really talks about avoid. So I know we all have stuff that we want to avoid. There's a topic you want to avoid. There's a person you want to avoid. There's something you want to avoid. And this text is asking you to, where's God in it? And what if you do something instead of avoiding it? What would that look like? What if you stopped avoiding that issue that you don't want to avoid, that you shouldn't avoid, but you keep avoiding? What about that person that you keep avoiding? Because there's a blessing at the end. So what do you guys think about that? I don't think Peggy's coming next week.
Well, if that person has no concept of this or how you feel about them or to try to explain that to them. They
Yep.
just like, yeah,
Then who's that on?
Them.
Them.
that's true.
And is
But
part.
you
Yeah.
keep on trying and trying and trying. Or is there a point where you just let it go?
There's a point where you let it go. But it does
Depends.
come back to bite you every now and then. And
Or getting wounded in the hip comes back to.
yeah, re-injured.
Yeah, you re-injure the hip. That's a great question, and I'll probably say yes to both.
That's not fair.
You did read the Bible, right? That's one thing that we find out in the Bible time and time again. It's not fair. But that's hard. That's part of. I would say that's part of the wrestling process. You know,
Trying.
to keep trying and to say, okay, can we keep doing that? Can we not? We keep wrestling with it, and eventually, yep, it worked out, or no, it didn't. But I think a lot of times people don't even do the wrestling process. They say, this is going to be too hard. We're not going to do it. Let's move on to the next thing. And I say that because I think a lot of our society right now is very much avoidance based. Everything we do right now is avoidance based. We're not supposed to talk to other people about certain things or anything. That's why you can talk about faith as long as you talk about it, in your own collapse. If you keep it to yourself, you can talk about faith. Okay, well, that's not really how it works, but sure. Or you have people that disagree with you. Again, just block them on Facebook, unfriend them, or whatever you want. You don't ever have to listen to them again. Okay? And I get, that's going to lower your stress level at the end of the day, but does that help you overall? You've obviously know them and like them and had them as a friend for a reason. And so now you're not. Is that reason as good as for when you wanted them to be your friend? So I don't know. So I think that's sort of the struggle we have with this particular text. This is sort of the struggle that is coming out of the Old Testament that is reminding us that, how do we struggle with stuff? How do we see stuff that at first glance could be very adversarial, and how can that be a blessing to us? Any other questions, thoughts?
What happened to Esau? Does the Bible ever say? Does it say where he went and what he did?
Yes. I don't remember. Off the top, I have to look it up.
He's the father of the Edomites, which end up being adversaries of Israel.
Surprisingly.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And like I said, I think at the end of the day, as much as Esau wanted to patch things up with Israel, I don't know if Jacob really, really followed through on that. So, much like us, the funny part of this story is, that Esau doesn't kill him. But like I said, does Jacob really
Work on the relationship.
work on the relationship? Does Jacob actually deserve to have the promise? And the answer to that would be no, he doesn't. He doesn't deserve it at all. But he still gets it.
Yeah.
Because this wonderful word called grace, that'll drive you nuts. Because,
There's something that comes in 33 in my explanation here that we don't get to.
Mhm.
And Don, you might know. It says something about because Jacob doesn't go with Esau, he did not then see his father, so his father was still living? That he could have seen his father again?
I thought he died.
In 33:12 to 17, perhaps Jacob did not want to face his father. So he never saw his father again.
But I thought his father was on the deathbed when he was
Well, that's
doing
what I
the
was
blessing.
thinking. how long was he gone? And it's in my 33:12 to 17 is where it says this. Because he didn't go live by Jacob, he decided to go somewhere else. And then, so he never saw his father again.
Yeah, because in my text it doesn't talk anything about Isaac still being
Well, I didn't
alive.
think he was either, but
Well, he must be, because we get a little further in 35:27, the death of Isaac. So he's got to be alive right now.
okay.
So there you go, and that's another reason why he should have followed through on his wrestling with Esau, because he could have gotten to see his father. So yes, so like another reason again why we need to think about why we do the things we do when we wrestle with stuff like that. Are we giving up a little too early? It will wound. We have to realize stuff will wound us. Stuff will change us, hopefully for the better, but not always. But I think a lot of times we're scared to even have any type of change in our lives. So, anything else?
But is there anything so wrong in just saying, I'm turning it over to you, God? I mean,
Yeah, because maybe
It-
years and years could go by
Are
without
you-
contact, and then something happens again.
Yeah.
Who knows?
does
Yeah.
that make us, well, we are weaklings, but I mean, does
We're
that?
non-confrontational, some of us, but yeah, let God do the confronting, and I'd much rather just
So I'll push
go by
back
his
on that.
guiding hand.
Oh, yeah.
If he pushes me into it, okay, here I am, but
So
try to
then,
put yourself
so
in
if
there.
we are God's hands and feet in the world,
Oh, no, here it comes.
if we are God's hands and feet in the world, what should we do? That should we?
We should keep working on the relationship.
And working on it could mean taking a break.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You could take a break and say we need to take a break for a little bit. But the danger to saying that is you're never going to come back to it. How many times you say we're going to take a break, and then you come back to that same thing again? Never. Most likely it's never now. It's just a way to say I'm going to avoid it now. And so again, just think of all the things in your life that you're avoiding right now. There's a lot of things we're avoiding. And how do we speak into those things? And know that it's not going to be easy when we speak into those things. God will bless us when we do that, but we also will be changed. And it might hurt a little bit. It might give us a limp. So, it's not a fun promise, is it? Because like I said, I think a lot of times we feel that, well, we're following God's promise, we're doing exactly what God wants, so everything should be on easy street. That's not the case. But then look at what happened to Jacob after this. You know, Jacob is blessed, Jacob has a lot of kids, Jacob is just fine after this, but it's only going through this adversity does he reach that particular point in time. Because he trusted enough in God to go through this, and trusted enough in God afterwards to keep doing this thing. So, any other thoughts?
But yet he didn't reconcile with his brother and his father, really.
No. Nope. He just think of the blessing that he would have gotten if he would have followed what God wanted him to do. But again, that's us.
Yeah, we run the other way.
We run the-
direction.
We got this. God gives us. Oh, God gave us this much. Okay, good. That's all I need to do. You know, I'm out of that situation. I don't need to do anything else. I just need to go on to the next thing. And so that's the other part of the story. God does what God's going to say, and Jacob responds like we respond. Okay. Well, thank you, God. You got me through what I needed to get through. I'm done. We'll see you in a little while. We'll see you 2 months from now at church. I'll pick up that Bible again in 6 months again because you did this for me, God. Thank you very much for doing that for me. I really appreciate that. Or, you know, thank you, God, for for helping me in this really hard situation. I will definitely be at Christmas service this year. I will actually sit near the front, so 3 pews down from the back. I will be.
No,
I'll be.
that's
We are very good at bargaining.
Yeah.
And conniving.
Yeah.
And
Very much.
Kind of
Jacob.
like Jacob.
Very much like
We're
Jacob.
all heels.
We're all heels. So, like I said, then that's what God invites us to do. So, any other things? Otherwise, what's our text for next week?
Exodus.
Exodus.
Exodus 1, 8 through 14. Exodus 1, 2, and 3, I guess.
Exodus 1, 2, and 3.
This is in God's name.
Okay. So,
What is it again?
This right here.
Oh, Exodus. Exodus.
absolutely.
Would you like one of these, Laura? Because there's more. Oh, it's in the next room, but we can get another one for you.
All right. So, as we think.
Want more coffee, Mama?
I've got them all marked.
Please.
We had this lesson when Pastor Carey was here, and I've got all
There you go.
marked.
Well, I think she did the narrative too, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, no. So as we think of the prayers for, actually I can stop this if we think about prayers.
Here, do you want a big piece of paper?
Do that, this.